February is Black History Month. If you're not familiar with the achievements of Black Americans, you are prone to believe what is said instead of what is factual in all walks of life. Queen Bess, Brave Bessie, were two names awarded to Bessie Coleman, the first Black female licensed pilot in the world. Unable to enter an American flight school, she learned French and enrolled in a Paris school. She earned the first international pilot's license by a Black person. At home, nobody would hire the AV extras, so she earned a living as a daredevil show person, doing figure eights and loop-the-loops. Her dream was to open a flight school for her people. Her persistence and accomplishments earned her a United States postage stamp in 1995. Garett Morgan's most important contribution was patenting the tricolor yellow traffic light that transforms safety on the roads. What is less known is that while working in his tailoring shop, he accidentally invented a hair straightener and got into the hair care business. Morgan's genius allowed him to patent many innovative products and start businesses. He invented the gas mask that was used during World War I. A bit of a showman, he promoted his products by playing a Native American, he was half Native American, while hiring a white person to play the inventor. But after saving the lives of two white men using his gas mask, he was revealed as the inventor, and many whites were upset. Morgan was the first Black man in Cleveland to own a vehicle. He even created a friction drive clutch for automobiles. Throughout the 1920s, Frederick McKenzie Jones invented improvements to movie projectors, shifting from silent to talking films. He created a forerunner of the snowmobile, and he built race cars. In the 1930s, he invented a refrigeration system to prevent food from spoiling in long-haul trucks and rail cars, a cooling device attached to the roof. He received 40 patents for refrigeration equipment. He posthumously became the first Black American inventor to receive the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Lois Cooper is known as a true pioneer with many firsts. She loved math and was the first female engineer for the California Division of Highways. Despite years of discrimination in the workplace, she earned a high level of respect doing complex mathematical calculations necessary for freeway construction planning. This was before calculators or computers, and her male engineer co-workers depended on her as the go-to mathematician. In the 1970s, she worked with the Los Angeles Council of Black Professional Engineers to promote engineering for Blacks, and she taught STEM classes. Elijah McCoy was an important inventor in the lubrication sector. He trained as a mechanical engineer apprentice in Scotland, came to the United States and worked for the Michigan Central Railroad. McCoy invented engine lubricators and earned nearly 60 patents. Unfortunately, due to a lack of capital, his name was not featured on many of the products he invented. He often sold patent rights to investors or allowed employers to own the rights. In 1920, he created the Elijah McCoy Manufacturing Company, where lubrication products sported his name. His products were so superior to others in the field that they were called the real McCoy. Bayard Rustin organized the famous March on Washington that featured Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech and brought more than 200,000 peaceful protesters together. Rustin also helped King found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was considered to be one of the most brilliant minds in the movement and served his community tirelessly, pushing for more jobs and better wages. Rustin is also credited by some with teaching Dr. King about Gandhi's belief in nonviolence and civil disobedience. Gordon Parks was one of the most prolific figures behind a camera in the 20th century. A self-taught photojournalist, he worked from the 1940s through the 1970s, capturing civil rights, poverty, race relations, and many aspects of life. He broke the color line in professional photography as the first Black at Life magazine. His work was seen in Ebony, Glamour, Vogue. Parks co-founded Essence magazine. He was also a musician and writer. In 1969, he was the first Black man to write and direct a major Hollywood studio feature film, The Learning Tree, and later, Shaft. In 2000, he won the Congress of Racial Equality Lifetime Achievement Award. Annie Turnbow Malone is seldom featured during Black History Month, but she was the first Black female self-made millionaire in America. In 1923, she was worth $14 million and introduced Madam C.J. Walker to the beauty industry as one of her agents. Outstanding achievements, love, betrayal, and loss to contemporary history until rediscovered and is now celebrated as a trailblazer in the beauty product industry. Ella Baker was a major force in shaping the development of the civil rights movement. As field secretary and branch director for the NAACP, Baker co-founded an organization that raised money to fight Jim Crow laws. She was a key organizer for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. One of her biggest contributions to the movement was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which prioritized nonviolent protests, assisted in organizing the 1961 Freedom Rides, and aided in registering thousands of Black voters. Mae Jameson was the first Black woman to orbit Earth. She was aboard the shuttle Endeavour in 1992. Jameson is also a physician, teacher, Peace Corps volunteer, and president of a tech company, the Jameson Group. She continues to work towards the advancement of young women of color, getting more involved in technology, engineering, and math careers. On her space mission, she took a picture of Bessie Coleman with her. Before Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and others, Sister Rosetta Tharp created a musical style that would take the world by storm. Hailed as the godmother of rock and roll, she was the originator of pop gospel and transformed musical delivery with her electric guitar. Little Richard called her his greatest influence, and Chuck Berry said that his entire career was just one long Rosetta Tharp impersonation. She also influenced the music of Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Aretha Franklin, Jerry Lee Lewis, Isaac Hayes, George Molly, Tina Turner, Meat Loaf, Neil Sedaka, Karen Carpenter, Eric Clapton, and more. Ethel L Payne is known as the First Lady of the Black Press. She combined activism with journalism during the 1950s and 1960s. Payne interviewed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., President John F. Kennedy, Nelson Mandela, and other noteworthy figures. In 1972, CBS hired Payne as a radio and television commentator, becoming the first Black woman to hold such a position. Payne is one of 4 female journalists honored by the United States Postal Service on a Women in Journalism stamp. Maria Williams paved the way as the first Black woman to produce, write, and act in her own silent crime film in 1923, The Flames of Wrath. She influenced later Black women of Hollywood. To distribute the film, she formed the Western Film Producing Company and booking exchange with her husband. The former was a Kansas City teacher and also an activist. She details her leadership skills in a 1916 book, My Work and Public Sentiment. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first Black female doctor in the United States. She attended the prestigious Massachusetts private West Newton English and Classical School and worked as a nurse for 8 years. She applied to medical school in 1860 at the New England Female Medical College. After graduation, Crumpler worked as a physician for the Freedmen's Bureau for the state of Virginia. She later practiced in Boston's predominantly Black neighborhood, Beacon Hill, and published a book of medical discourses in 2 parts. Alice Coachman became the first Black woman from any country to win an Olympic gold medal at the 1948 Summer Olympics in London. She set the record for the high jump, leaping to 5 feet and 6 1/8 inches. 4 years later, she became the first Black female athlete to endorse an international consumer product when she signed on as a Coca-Cola spokesperson. Over the course of her career, she won 34 national titles. She was officially inducted into the National Track and Field Hall of Fame in 1975 and the United States Olympic Hall of Fame in 2004. Ann Lowe is considered to be one of America's most influential Black clothing designers. She was taught by her mother and grandmother, both skilled dressmakers who created clothing for wealthy white families in Alabama. She moved to New York City and completed design school there. She opened shops in Tampa, Florida, hiring 18 seamstresses, and New York City, where she was pursued in upper-class circles, Broadway, and film stars. Much of her work for Vogue and stars wearing her designs at Academy Award shows did not give her credit. But she is best known as the designer for the entire Jacqueline Kennedy wedding party. Benjamin Davis Sr. was promoted to brigadier general in 1940, the first Black general in the United States Army. He served for 50 years, beginning as a temporary first lieutenant during the Spanish-American War. Throughout his service, Davis was a professor of military science at Tuskegee and Wilberforce universities, commander of the 369th Infantry of the New York National Guard, and special assistant to the commanding general, among other positions. He received the Bronze Star Medal and the Distinguished Service Medal. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. James Bolan graduated from Wesley College in 1928 and in 1931 was the first Black woman to attend Yale Law School. In 1939, she became the first Black female judge in the United States, serving over 40 years. One of her significant contributions throughout her career was working with private employers to hire people based on their skills, as opposed to discriminating against them because of their race. She served on the boards of the NAACP, Child Welfare League of America, and the Neighborhood Children's Center. Robert Abbott was the founder of the Chicago Defender newspaper in 1905, which was published weekly. The Chicago Defender reported on issues important to the Black community, including riots and lynchings. It encouraged Blacks living under Jim Crow laws in the South to move north. The circulation grew from 50,000 copies in 1916 to 125,000 in 1918 and to over 200,000 in the 1920s. The success of the paper made Abbott one of the first Black self-made millionaires. Born in Georgia in 1870 to formerly enslaved parents, Abbott graduated from Kent Law School in Chicago. He was instrumental in assisting Bessie Coleman to pursue her dreams to fly high. Jesse Owens was a track and field athlete who set a world record in the long jump at the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin and went unrivaled for 25 years. He won 4 gold medals at the Olympics that year in the 100 and 200-meter dashes, along with the 100-meter relay and other events off the track. In 1976, Owens received the Presidential Medal of Freedom and was posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1990. Claudette Colvin, at age 15, made history in 1955. 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, Claudette refused to move to the back of the bus to give up her seat to a white person. When the bus driver ordered her to get up, she refused. She said that she had paid her fare and it was her constitutional right. She was arrested. Quote, "All I remember is that I was not going to walk off that bus voluntarily," end quote. Colvin later became the main witness in the federal lawsuit, Browder versus Gale, which ended segregation on public transportation in Alabama. Nationally renowned neurosurgeon Dr. Alexa Kennedy became the first Black woman neurosurgeon in the United States in 1981 and the youngest Black female in her specialty at age 30. Kennedy received her BS in 1971 and graduated cum laude from the College of Medicine at the University of Michigan in 1975. She was the first Black woman to be enrolled in the hospital's internship program. Dr. Kennedy served as the chief of neurosurgery at Children's Hospital in Michigan from 1987 until her retirement in 2001. Victor Hugo Green developed and published the Negro Motorist Green Book for Black travelers' safe passage through the South. During segregation, it was problematic for Blacks driving through hostile areas, notorious for Jim Crow practice and anti-Black violence. Travelers were not welcome at lodging facilities, restaurants, and gas stations limited to whites only. The book was much used and no doubt saved lives. But this was also a time when a prosperous Black middle class was built, serving travelers who took advantage of their businesses and entertainment sites listed in the Green Book. It was published from 1936 to 1966. Passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and eventual integration rendered the Green Book unnecessary. It also put a damper on the growth of Black-owned businesses in the South. Charles Hamilton Houston graduated from Amherst College and Harvard Law School. He became the dean of Howard University Law School. Houston was also the NAACP's first special counsel, and he played a significant role in dismantling Jim Crow laws, particularly school segregation and racial housing covenants. He earned the title, "The Man Who Killed Jim Crow," and helped train and mentor Thurgood Marshall. The book Hidden Figures highlights 3 Black female astrophysicists who helped shape space exploration and NASA. Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson worked at NACA, which became NASA in 1958, as human computers in the segregated West Area Computing Sector of Langley. They worked on Project Mercury, which helped astronauts John Glenn, Alan Shepard, and Gus Grissom successfully orbit Earth, the first men to do so. A popular movie of the same title depicts their journey and achievements. Blacks do STEM. Fanny Lou Hamer began her career as a civil rights activist in the early 60s, when she was first denied the right to vote because of literacy tests. In 1963, she sat in a whites-only bus station and was beaten, leaving her with lifelong injuries, including a blood clot in her eye. She entered the national spotlight when she co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which fought the local Democrats on voting rights. She also organized Freedom Summer, which was an event that brought students of all races together to help Blacks register to vote in the South. Hamer was known for her eloquent and powerful speeches. Her most famous line, however, is, quote, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired," end quote. Reverend Hosea Williams was severely beaten for drinking at a whites-only water fountain. He joined the NAACP in Atlanta, Georgia, and worked his way up the ranks to help Dr. King run the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They traveled around the South, teaching people about civil disobedience. At Bloody Sunday in 1965, Williams was beaten during the first Selma to Montgomery March. King alternately referred to Williams as his chief field lieutenant, as his bull in the china shop, his Castro. Vowing to continue King's work for the poor, Williams is well known in his own right as the founding president of one of the largest social service organizations in North America, Hosea, Feed the Hungry and Homeless. His famous motto was, "Unbought and unbossed." Less than a year after Massachusetts adopted its state constitution, a woman no one had heard of did an extraordinary thing. Originally born Mum Bet, an enslaved woman, filed a legal challenge citing the Constitution's promise of liberty and won her freedom in court. Changed her name to Elizabeth Freeman, she became the first woman to successfully file a lawsuit for her right to freedom in the state of Massachusetts. This groundbreaking moment established a pathway for a host of subsequent suits and eventually prompted the Massachusetts Judicial Court to outlaw slavery altogether. Freeman worked as a paid domestic, midwife, healer, and nurse. Her efforts paid off, and she was able to buy her own home. George Carruthers was a physicist at NASA. Carruthers built his own telescope when he was 10 years old. After earning a PhD from the University of Illinois, he worked at the U.S. Naval Research Library as a National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow. In 1969, he was awarded a patent for an ultraviolet camera. It was used in 1972 during the first moonwalk of Apollo 16. It allowed scientists to analyze the atmosphere in more detail than ever before. In later years, he continued to develop inventions for the NASA program and paid it forward by developing an apprenticeship program that gave high school students the chance to work in the U.S. Naval Laboratory. In 2003, He was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. If you're using a personal computer device today, you've got Mark Dean to thank. He was a trailblazing scientist, inventor, and computer engineer. He was the first Black IBM fellow. He developed the ISA bus and led a design team for making a 1 gigahertz computer processor chip, which performed a billion calculations a second. He holds 3 of 9 PC patents for being the co-creator of the IBM personal computer released in 1981. Among his projects were the first color computer monitor. Dean was elected as a member of the National Academy of Engineering in 2001. Matthew Henson was part of Lieutenant Robert Peary's expedition to the North Pole. He was invaluable to the team, mastering the Alaskan Native language, their survival techniques, and had superior dog sledding and navigational skill. Peary became ill during the mission, but Henson and a team pushed on to the North Pole. He claimed that he was the first of his party to reach the pole and wrote about this in his 1912 book, A Negro Explorer at the North Pole. In 1950, Henson was given a Congressional Medal and a Presidential Citation. They also corrected the slight of giving him a lesser medal than the white team members. When the sky is the limit and you want to transform your majestic mountain land into a castle complex, who do you call? In the early 1900s, mega wealthy William Randolph Hearst called Julia Morgan. Julia Morgan was called America's first independent full-time woman architect. In 1898, she became the first woman to win entry into a prestigious architecture school in Paris, France. In 1904, she was the first woman to pass California's architecture license examination, first to be licensed in the state. Besides being lead architect for the massive Hearst Castle and Village, Morgan's work is dotted around California. Joyce Nicholls was born in small-town Roxborough, North Carolina, but entered the world stage in 1970 when she graduated from the physician's assistant program at Duke University Medical Center, becoming the first woman PA in the world. A remarkable woman and civil rights advocate, she sued the federal government and won. Nicholls dedicated her life to providing care in rural communities and populations typically underserved. From born enslaved to one of the wealthiest Black Americans of the 19th and early 20th century, Julius Grov is an unheard of Black American dream hero. Named in 1902 by the United States Department of Agriculture, the Potato King of the world, Grov's optimized potato growth methods, outproducing anyone else in the world to that point. He owned 760 acres of farmland, producing fruits and vegetables to feed people in America, Canada, and Mexico. A train spur was installed on his property to facilitate transport of his massive produce. Lena Richards was a chef, cookbook author, restaurateur, frozen food entrepreneur, and television host. In 1949, Richard became the first Black woman to host her own television cooking show. It aired from October 1949 to November 1950. She opened a cooking school in 1937 in New Orleans, specifically for Black students. In 1939, Richards self-published Lena Richards' cookbook, the first Black author to feature New Orleans Creole cuisine. Thomas, blind Tom Wiggins, was born enslaved and autistic. As a child, he showed rare talent playing piano. So, how did he become the highest paid pianist in the 19th century? He was the first Black performer for a president of the United States. His gripping and sad story of use and abuse will amaze you. His handlers made millions. Nevertheless, his story is compelling and worth the watch. Blind Tom Wiggins at ASP History YouTube channel. Julian Francis Abel was a prominent Black architect and chief designer in the offices of Horace Trumbauer, a white firm located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He contributed to the design of more than 400 buildings, including the Widener Memorial Library at Harvard University, Philadelphia's Central Library, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and he was the primary designer of the West Campus of Duke University. Yes, more than the prestigious Duke Chapel. From 1924 to 1954, the Allen Administration Building, Cameron Stadium, and other buildings were guided by him. Being Black, he was not allowed to visit Duke at that time, but rumor has it that he visited the campus in disguise. When Ronald McNair graduated valedictorian at Carver High School in 1967, who knew that he would become a NASA astronaut and physicist? McNair earned a PhD in physics at MIT and became one of the first Black Americans selected astronauts at NASA, alongside Bluford and Gregory. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 35 during the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger with other crew members. In the summer of 1959, McNair refused to leave the segregated Lake City Public Library without being allowed to check out his books. After the police and his mother were called, McNair was allowed to borrow books from the library. The building that housed the library at the time is now named in his honor. James McCune Smith was a physician, apothecary, abolitionist, and author. He was the first Black American to earn a medical degree. He studied at the University of Glasgow and obtained a bachelor's degree in 1835, a master's degree in 1836, and a medical degree in 1837. He completed an internship in Paris, France. Returning to Manhattan, New York, he practiced medicine and opened the first pharmacy owned by a Black person in the nation. It was burned to the ground during the draft riots in 1863. Reginal Lewis's first business was a paper route that was so successful that he sold it for a profit. He was good at everything he did. He earned a football scholarship to Virginia State University and graduated from Harvard Law School. He worked for a top law firm in New York and opened his own firm. But Lewis made his mark on history by becoming the first Black American to build a billion-dollar company, TLC Beatrice International Holdings, Inc. In 1993, Forbes listed Lewis among the 400 richest Americans, with a net worth estimated at $400 million. Runaway slave Bass Reeves became a gunfighter, farmer, scout, tracker, and later a deputy U.S. Marshal. He spoke several Native American languages, including Cherokee and Creek. Bass was one of the first Black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi River, mostly working in the rough Indian Territory. The region was saturated with horse thieves, cow rustlers, gunslingers, bandits, swindlers, and murderers. Bass made more than 3,000 arrests in his lifetime, only killing 14 men in self-defense. He was never shot or badly injured and arrested his own son. His 32-year career ended when Oklahoma became a state, outlawing blacks in these positions. His legendary stories became the text for The Lone Ranger. Black History Month illustrates and celebrates that when your country belongs to you and you belong to your country, you work tirelessly to improve it.